This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Throughout the nation and around the globe, from his heart to yours, it's Dear James Live on the radio, here on the Contact Talk Radio Network, bringing you intuitive insight, answers, and advice to your life questions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dear James Live on the radio, here on the Contact Talk Radio Network. Today is Thursday, and of course, I have begun my new schedule. I have my new shows every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and that is Express Yourself, Tell It Like It Is, and then hear what Dear James has to say. And of course, Thursdays, it's the first, third, and fifth Thursday of each month. I am doing Dear James Live on the radio, where we talk about featured content and featured guests. And today's show, Victim or Participant. And this show I put on the schedule many months ago, and I kept pushing it back because it's an incredibly challenging topic, because it's going to require that we really look at ourselves. So before I get into that, I want to make sure that everybody knows this is both shows, especially Wednesday, is an all-live call-in show. And I absolutely take your calls on Thursday. So Wednesday and Thursday, call in. Have the courage to call in. I say that every week because it's how you can transform and move yourself through things just by talking about it. So the number to call in, it's toll-free, 877-230-3062. And I also, of course, take your questions, your written questions. You can go to DearJames.com and click on Ask and submit your question there, and I will respond, and it will show up on my website and on my Facebook page and so forth. And sometimes I read them live here on the air because I really love to share people's experiences and what they're going through, because what I find is something will resonate. Whether I'm speaking with one particular caller or I'm speaking on a particular topic, it resonates with people and it ripples. There's a ripple effect. And so it's an amazing way to participate. So have the courage to call in live. And I also wanted to talk about some of the upcoming shows. So again, on Wednesday, it's Express Yourself, Tell It Like It Is, and then hear what Dear James has to say. And next Wednesday is Thorn in Your Side. What is that thorn in your side? What's festering? What's taking place or happening that you need to let go of? And the week after that is Sex and Sensuality, all about expressing yourself. And on the Dear James live shows here on Thursday, in the beginning of the year, I introduced the Power of series, the power of permission, the power of gratitude, the power of forgiveness, the power of intention, and the power of surrender. And explain to you that those are 5 foundational life elements. And when you live your life by those 5 principles, you eventually ascend, if you will, to a place of, and what I'm going to be launching and presenting here in the coming weeks is the power of faith and the power of now. And it's by living in the present, in the now, and it's by living in faith that, and I'm not speaking about religious faith. I'm talking about faith that is innate in every single human soul. And whether you attend an organized religion or a church or prayer group or whatever, that's a form of faith. However, faith is not dependent upon religion. And so to have faith is to have a belief, a feeling that is greater than oneself, and that you're being led and guided, that there is something far greater that connects all of us, that truly runs, for a very simple term, runs the entire universe, our existence. And so those two, the power of faith and the power of now, are going to be coming up. And ultimately, the pinnacle, as I have talked about, is the power of love. And that when you live your life on a love-based foundation, it expands and you are truly limitless. And then we're going to have some fun later in the year, in the coming months, with the power of enthusiasm, the power of trust, the power of music, and the power of dance. And there's going to be a few others, but those are out there. So, and ultimately, all of this is going to culminate for me in a what I'm calling a book/workbook for you that's going to be called or entitled The Power Of. And so I'm very excited about that and very excited to bring you these future shows that kind of culminate and give you a roadmap, if you will, on perhaps a better way forward. Because I think that a lot of us are searching for a better way forward. And that brings me into today's show. Victim or participant. And I often say and firmly believe that there are really ever only two choices. You choose to be a victim in life, and thereby there is a victim mentality, or, and by that I mean everything is being done to you. You have no control. You have abdicated that responsibility, and thereby everything in your life and all of your experiences and relationships and people and all of that are from a victim or a victimized place, or you are a participant, a co-creator, and you are creating each moment, and that is the defining difference. Are you co-creating everything that happens in life, in your life, and are you taking responsibility for it? And so that's why this was it's a very challenging topic to discuss. However, it's a very incredibly rewarding one. And so I wanted to put it out there. I wanted to bring this to the forefront and talk about victim or participant. In order to even begin, we have to look at one simple component, and that is the word self, because that is where everything begins. It begins with ourself. And so I found that, so I'm going to back up a little bit. I want to go back. I'm a definition guy, and I love that when you get into this, you have to look at all of the facets of, well, what is everything predicated on, and where does it start, and where does it originate and begin, and what are we doing? So we know that when we come into this topic, the key component is self. Because the self, the you, or the I, or the collective we, there has to be an identity, a self involved. And I got to looking, and I started looking up all the words where the word self was placed in front of it, or utilized in conjunction with it. And it's really quite staggering how many words there are that that utilize that, from self-assured to self-actualization, self-reliance, self-sustaining, self-preservation, self-image, self-defense. I mean, the list goes on. But it's really quite interesting. But at its core, it's about the word self. And it struck me, which was really funny, was one of the phrases, the words self-help popped up. And I was laughing, and I was taken aback. And I stopped and I thought, it's a multi-billion-dollar business. It's a multi-billion dollar business. And what it really boils down to, when you think of everything that's in the self-help category and what we're talking about and doing, it all boils down to you. It's the one thing that the entire self-help industry is dependent upon, is you. Without you, and I mean you, the self, and you either have the desire to co-create, to propel yourself forward, to evolve, to have greater wisdom and so forth, or you don't. And so it's interesting that self-help, but the component of it is people, there are external people. You're listening to Dear James Live. I'm talking to you in essence about self-help. However, that is exactly the point. It's self-help. I can speak to you all day long. Other people, you can take every seminar and course in the world and read every book and listen to every guru. And unless you come back to the self-help, it's meaningless. It doesn't do anything, because the only person that's in control of your evolution, of your progression or regression, is you. So I know that if you're listening to the shows and you're following my shows, I'm all about encouragement, empowerment, and evolution, propelling yourself forward, and doing so in a prosperity, abundant, driven way. And yet it still relies upon you. So we have to start at the self, and that's what I want to give you a definition of self. It's a person's essential being that distinguishes them from others, especially considered as the object of introspection or reflective action. So when you understand that it's a person's essential being that distinguishes them from others. Now, that in its purest form is self. When you heap on characteristics and ego and so forth, then it somewhat bogs down and colors self. And you may be asking, well, how does this tie into victim or participant? And, again, what I'm trying to convey to you is you have to start at the beginning, and you have to start at the core. And the core of whether you choose to be a victim or you choose to be a co-creator, a participant, is at your core, yourself. And it's a defining attribute that distinguishes you from others. And so the interesting thing about the synonyms for self are ego, I, oneself, persona, person, identity, character, personality, psyche, soul, spirit, mind, or also inner being. And it says, listen to your inner self. And so it's very interesting. All in the synonyms of self, you have both of what I just talked about. On one side, you have kind of the ego, the I, the persona, or the identity, the character, the personality, or the psyche that we put out to others. It's kind of our defense mechanisms. It's the way we go out into the world. It's the way we attempt to define ourselves, to distinguish ourselves from others. And yet what you're really, really, really meant to do is look at the other half of that definition of those synonyms: soul, spirit, mind, inner being, your inner self. It's really saying to you that you have two halves. You have a soul, spirit, self, and you have a identity, character, ego, self. And those two identities, if you will, or those two halves of the whole, of the self, are what are most times at conflict with one another. And it's how do you harmonize those two? How do you get those two to come together? And what I'm going to explain to you and share with you is when you lead with your soul self, with your spirit self, your identity self or your personality self or your ego self, after a little bit of struggle, will come in alignment because it will understand that it's not going to be eradicated or obliterated. It's going to be honed and refined. Your ego self is going to improve. It's going to lighten up because it's not going to be as threatened, because it's going to learn to trust its spirit self, its soul self. It's going to realign and remember that that is its guiding principle. That's its guiding light. That's its true north. And when you go and originate and live from that place, defining or choosing, and when we come back from the break, it's going to be all about how choice plays a role in this, but it then shows you that you're defining moments in life every time an event happens or an engagement happens. Is it from a place of co-creation because you're leading with your soul or spirit self, or is it from a place of ego and thereby times you create or live by a victim identity? And the more you shift away from a victim identity, the greater your spirit and your evolution expands. So we're talking about victim or participant. This is Dear James live on the radio here on the Contact Talk Radio Network. We're going to go to a quick station break, and we will be back. We'll be taking your calls live as well, 877-230-3062.
The desire to be more consciously enlightened is innate. Do you feel there's more to life? If so, find the resource that's right for you by going to DearJames.com/resources. You are the reality you create. Make it a great one. When you ask a question, the universe hears you, and in a multitude of ways, they seek to communicate with you to provide the intuitive insight, answers, and advice you seek. From serious to silly, monumental to mundane, there's nothing the universe can't cover. Maybe the insight you receive is exactly the affirmation you were looking for. Then again, it may just give you a whole new perspective on things. And that's the beauty of the universe. Submit your question to Dear James at DearJames.com and click Ask.
Available for private, individual, group, and corporate consultations, Dear James will provide you with the intuitive insight, answers, and advice to your life questions. Schedule your consultation by going to www.dearjames.com and click on Consultation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dear James Live on the radio here on the Contact Talk Radio Network. We are talking about victim or participant today, and challenging topic, but yet an incredibly rewarding one. And as I often do during my break, I am, of course, speaking with my producer, Barb, and And so it's an interesting thing because sometimes she calls these particular shows my lecture series, and I laugh because I'm always like, and she's like, I don't know. We're talking about victim or participant, and I don't know. There's like a 3% rule that I think you can explain. Anybody can explain anything except for 3%. So tell me, Barb, talk to me. Tell me why, because I knew, what's funny about this before we do that? I knew that this was going to be
you'd be talking to me.
Well, no, I mean, a thought-provoking, because it really requires us to look at ourselves, to look at our beliefs, to our belief system. It really, victim or participant, is about how am I living my life? What are the choices I'm making? What are my beliefs? Am I, which camp am I in? Or am I in between somewhere? And I'm, how do I move forward? How do I get out of that? How do I stop doing that to myself? So I knew it was going to be a challenging deal. And then I'm laughing with you because you're like, I don't know, and I'm like, perfect. Perfect. The universe works. So talk to me, Barb. Talk to me.
Well, no, I do. For the most part, I do get the whole victim. A lot of it are people bringing on themselves. It's just whether it's poor decisions or circumstances plus attracting poor decisions, whether that's financial or, romance, you name it, those type of things. But like I was saying during the break, sometimes there's people you meet, like I had worked with a gentleman years ago, and the poor guy, usually you can say, well, the reason they have such bad luck is because of this. But he was the nicest, most gracious person. And then we started talking about, the soul. Here, elaborate what you had said to me.
Right. Well, and here's the point to everyone listening is, the point here is that she was saying, okay, this guy has horrible bad luck, but, he was nice and he was kind of happy-go-lucky. And I said to her, well, wait a minute. Why is it not that his soul chose to experience this life, this purported bad luck and so forth? And I said, it's really sometimes what we forget is everything we do is through a lens of our perception. It is colored by that lens. And so sometimes when we look at other people or other countries or other beliefs or systems and so forth, or we see someone that is disabled, or, we automatically color them with a lens of, oh, poor person. Instead of seeing their beauty, instead of seeing what gift is it that they are giving us that we're missing, that we're not seeing, because we've automatically, by default, slapped our perception on them. And that was my point in that, is that we have to be careful. I can already hear you going, So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to let you go.
No. It's interesting that you say that, because I had learned that one a long time ago. I remember one of my classes, we were talking about that same, being disabled and people who, and I had said in class to one of the other gals, and I'll always remember this. I'm like, oh, that's so sad. And she looked at me and she's like, he don't need your pity. And I was like, oh, she's right. And I was young. I think I was 12. But it was such an interesting point of view, and it's so true. And my mother, she's like Mother Teresa, I tell you, with a little bit of a mouth. But she's the same way. She is very, very giving towards the disabled, and she does not treat them she's there to help and so forth. And yeah, and she's another person that does, and she's also said, who's to say that wasn't chosen before, but she goes, I know they go straight to heaven. So,
what's funny is, and we're talking about victim or participant, right?
Right.
So here it is with this woman saying, oh, he doesn't need your pity. Right. What's funny is, do we, by default or accident or whatever,
to make us feel better?
No, we almost, what I'm getting at is, we then reinforce a belief of victimhood.
Right.
By, again, giving them, it's our perception. So we're, at times, buying into or reinforcing something, instead of seeing its exact opposite, instead of seeing these, if God in the universe created everything in its perfect form, then what is it that we're missing by not seeing people in other circumstances that are not ours, by not seeing the lesson or the beauty by which they're attempting to teach us? We automatically slap that blanket of pity on them, which reinforces victimhood.
Right.
And we miss the opportunity to say, what is it that you're sent here? You're perfect in your form. What is it that you were sent here to teach me or teach us? It's it's a very interesting. But I do love that your mother is like St. Teresa with a little bit of...
with a little bit of a mouth.
Yeah, I like a little bit of a mouth. I like that. I'm like, I got to meet this lady.
Oh, she's great. And then throw in a German accent with it, too, and you're all good to go.
Well, I'm sitting there. I didn't know if I was going to either kneel, bow, or duck because I was going to get slapped. I got to figure it out.
Right.
Like, oh, my God. I don't know which way do I go? Which way do I go? Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, Barb, because it was an interesting component and piece. I may drag you back in a little bit.
Right, because we had talked about the misery part, and I said, I don't know if I'd sign up for misery.
Okay, let's just go there then. Let's clear misery out of the way. Barb was also saying, in that 3%, that she's like, I mean, come on, who chooses misery? And I'm like, funny enough, people do. And again, if someone wants to be of misery,
right?
Who's to say that that's not exactly what they wanted to learn this time around? And I would say that from the standpoint of, if someone is miserable or living a miserable life, a life of misery, in a certain aspect, as long as that is not from a victim place, i.e. that they are kind of heaping that out onto others, then what's to say that that person's misery isn't what they need? Because we're judging it. We're judging that they're miserable. Now, if their misery is being directed to us, is coming
different.
Over to us.
Yeah, that's the victimhood coming in. Yeah, totally different story. Because then
exactly.
You know that they're getting it because it's whether they get attention from it or any of those type of things, they're getting some sort of reward for their misery.
Exactly.
But we're talking more about people that are that live, whether it's physical aspects or things like those type of things that they're living in misery. What we would perceive misery as, because
that's our perception, and
right.
I'm not trying to lighten, world living conditions and poverty,
correct,
and no drinking water or filthy drinking water and things of those nature. Okay, those are things that we as a society, as a human
collective,
can do better on. However, we have to be careful when we impose our belief system, our way of life on another, because, you take the like indigenous peoples and so forth.
Correct.
They live perfectly fine and beautifully, and I would say far richer.
I agree.
Than us, and we go and impart. We go in and push ourselves into them, saying, no, you don't have Wi-Fi, and you don't have a cell phone, and you don't have. Oh my God, you poor people.
First world problems.
And right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Because they aren't victims. They are absolutely co-creating one of the most richest, experiences. And it's only our lens of perception that starts coloring and altering their world, which is perfectly harmonious and balanced. So it is, again, we have to be careful of what right did we have? Who gave us the right to say, this is what's right for you?
Right, and you're living in misery.
And you're living in misery.
Right.
Misery is only misery if it's from a place of victimhood and you are heaping that on others.
And everybody in your path.
Right. Because then it's like some awful tornado, and
right.
and you're doing it to everyone, and that's not acceptable.
Agreed.
So,
Great.
Does that take care of misery?
That takes care. That takes care of misery. I'll jump in if there's anything else.
All right, wonderful. Thank you,
Great.
Barb.
Thank you.
As always, thank you, Barb, for participating.
You're welcome.
It's the dialogue. It's about this. So we're coming back. We're talking about victim or participant, and how how it all begins at self. Self. It has to start with you. It has to start there. And I want to go before this to the definition of a victim. And it's a person harmed, injured, or killed as a result of a crime, accident, or other event or action. And the synonyms of it are sufferer, injured party, casualty, fatality, loss, loser, a victim of crime, a person who is tricked or duped. And when they go on to give a definition of the victim of a hoax, that the synonyms are a loser, prey, stooge, dupe, sucker, fool, fall guy, or chump. It has all of these negative connotations to the word victim. And yet, this is one of the big points, and it talks about the fact that when we live life from a victim place, from a victim mentality, we are literally wrapping ourselves in this heavy cloak of victimhood, of being a fatality, a loss, a casualty, a fool, a chump, a prey, a loser. We stop at the surface, and that is one of the worst things we can ever do, is you stop at the surface, you look at it, you color it with your perspective lens, and then you stop at the surface and you say, oh, poor, we stop. We fail to see the gifts. We fail to see the lessons that we are meant to understand, and more so, transcend. So clearly the opposite. So the opposite of a victim is the participant, a co-creator, a participant. And that definition is a person who takes part in something. And the synonyms are a participator, a contributor, a competitor, a player, a candidate, an entrant. And they had an example of eager students become first-hand participants in an exploration of self. And I found it very interesting that was the definition in the dictionary online, was that participants in an exploration of self. So it immediately affirms what I'm talking about, is that if you're a participant, it comes back to the self. It starts at the self. And those are very defining moments, because if you don't, and this is where we get now, I'm going to lead into the words before we go to another break, but it all boils down to three things: self-responsibility, self-awareness, and self-reflection. Those three attributes, those three exercises will define in every moment, if you were to ask yourself, am I taking self-responsibility for my actions? What was my participation in this event, or this relationship, or this exchange? What was my role? What was my part? What was my responsibility? The second part would be self-awareness. Are we being self-aware? Are you being self-aware with yourself to have this conversation? And the third part is self-reflection, that you are reflective enough with yourself to look at yourself, to look in. I say this over and over and over again, we always look out. this person did. This is happening to me. These people are, this job is. We're always looking out. And we have to begin to pivot. It's like I say, stop and pivot and look in. Look in and see, what is it that I'm really doing? What's my part in this? What's my responsibility? Am I being aware? Am I willing to go there? And then reflect on it and see the answers that come. Before we go to the break, I want to take Jennifer. Jennifer's calling from Paris. Hello, Jennifer. Yes. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you.
Good.
You're calling in victim or participant.
Well, exactly. Well, I have to say I have snuck off to an empty room at my office, and I'm not sure how long I'm going to be able to be in here incognito. And I didn't get to hear everything that you said so far, but so at the risk of making you repeat yourself, I wanted to ask you a question. Recently, I have determined that I have a relationship with my mother, which I no longer want to be either victim or participant, and I've pretty much come to terms with that, and I'm feeling okay about it. However, I've done something fabulous once again, as you would say, Mercury in retrograde. I have befriended a woman who is really, really lovely in many ways. And the other day, she really got on my nerves, and I sat down and I really thought about her, and I realized that she's my mother.
Ah.
Are you there? Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, okay, she's not my mother. I mean, she's not obviously, she doesn't affect me in the same way, and it isn't in the same proportion. But, I don't know. Now I'm thinking to myself, well, now what do I do? Here I go. It took me forever to finally figure out how I felt about my mom and, deal with that whole situation and, sort of own up to my role in the relationship.
Right.
And, here I've I've brought somebody else into my life who shares many qualities, shall we say. And unfortunately, she's just a really nice person, but she drags me down, and I don't want to be in another situation like this. So my question for you is, how does one, when one realizes so much quickly, says, past the congratulations, you've figured it out, you're not going to repeat yourself, you're going to get out of it quicker, how does one do that gracefully and kindly without, inflicting pain?
Right. Well, okay. But first of all, you got to kind of back up and go to the fact that you, again, victim or participant, you're realizing that you're a participant and you've invited this woman in, and
right.
But you did it for a reason, because you weren't done with the lesson, and the lesson isn't to excise your mother out of your life, or it's these attributes, it's the feelings, the reactions, the history, and the longevity. And so there's a point here where you've invited this woman in. That's let's call it mini mommy, because mini mommy, because what I'm getting is that you're neither a victim or a participant yet. You've moved away from the victimhood and you're releasing all of these things. But your definition of moving on is to just release them and close the door. I'm done. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm okay with that. That baggage showed up because you're still dragging that baggage, because what you did is you took all that stuff that you don't like and you put it in some really beautiful Louis Vuitton steamer trunks.
Well, I'm always for that.
And you're dragging those things along. And they showed up on your doorstep. You're like, I could have sworn I shipped those off somewhere. And here's Mini Mommy, and she pops right up, and and she was fun until she wasn't fun. And that's the issue. Well, what
I
the universe is trying to say.
Now here I am confronted with a. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Well, what I'm saying to you is, what the universe is trying to present to you is the awareness that, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't have to put mom in a box and lock her away and send her off to storage and say, I'm okay with that. What you're meant to do is look at all of because that's stopping on the surface. That's taking all the stuff that's on the surface and putting it in a nice suitcase and packing it away. This is about, how do I truly transcend the underlying feelings, emotions, the things that mom triggers in me? How do I let go of those? Because mom agreed to show up. Mini mom agreed to show up. So that you would see the underlying emotions, the underlying things that are triggered in you when those behaviors happen, when those exchanges happen, so that you'll transcend those, and then you'll be free. You will have liberated yourself, and then those traits will have no effect on you. And thereby mom doesn't have to be locked. Yeah, mom doesn't have to be locked in the closet or in a steamer trunk, because those buttons no longer have the impact, the reaction.
No, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, I get it.
So I would say to you, in a certain way, without, and you must be authentic, but maybe practice with mini mom.
Yeah.
I mean,
had a
be
feeling
authentic.
you were going to go that way.
What's that? Say it again.
I said I had a feeling that you were going to say that.
Well, it's certainly, I mean, again, be authentic with everyone that you come in contact with, but and say, you know what, I mean, I would have an honest conversation and say, what's funny, I think you're great, and there are certain things in you that trigger a reaction like my mother, and I wonder if that's why you've come into my life. Be real and be honest. And that gives that other person the opportunity to say, yes, I'll stay for this, or no, that's not going to work for me. Don't dupe somebody.
Ultimately, it's her decision to be a victim or a participant as well, and she decides what she's accepting. I mean, I always try to, manage and be responsible for everybody's feelings, which is completely stupid. I know we can't do that, but I don't want to hurt anybody. Really, the bottom line is I really don't want to inflict pain, and I do have, really, some nice friendship feelings for her. And I know she's a decent person with a good heart, but she just, this stuff comes surging back up. And I see myself, I guess you're right, that I see myself doing, repeating these same actions. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I'm going to become, am I going to become a victim or a participant again? Or am I going to stop this? Do you see what I'm saying?
Right. And also, don't forget, just as in your mother's case and in Mini Mom's case, you also are showing up to give them an opportunity to no longer be a victim, to choose a different way. So you both play a role in each other's, and that's why I'm saying don't lie to this woman or lead her astray in a way, that would then later reinforce her belief in victimhood.
No, I agree. And
you see what I'm saying?
I don't. I'm actually, absolutely. And I'm actually really honest with her. And I do. I mean, that in and of itself is something, a behavior for me that has changed. And I'm feeling, just more powerful, that I do pretty much tell her how I see things. And I mean, never in an unkind way, of course, but I do tell her and I do share my feelings. But I can tell that sometimes I really hurt her, and I don't say them to hurt her. I say them because we're talking about, something, and it comes up and we'd have a discussion, and then boom, it comes out, because I don't want to be dishonest with her. Right. I can see that sometimes I do hurt her, and it's not because I intended to hurt her. It's because we're talking about it. I mean, it's just as simple as that, So I guess you're right. And that's her decision. She has a role.
Yes, you both play a role. You both willfully chose to come together and exercise this experience. And in that's why I'm saying, if you're always authentic and true and genuine, then you're freeing each other for the opportunities of choice. I choose to not, or I choose to hear you. Like this woman can say, I hear to choose you, Jennifer, and I choose to understand that perhaps in this instance I was being a victim, and I'm not, and that's incorrect. And at the same token, you're able to say, this really isn't about this feeling that's on the surface. It's really about the emotion that it's triggering below that.
Right.
And that's the gift. That's the issue that I have to deal with. And thank you for bringing it out again. Because I thought I packed up the big one and put it in the Louis steamer trunks over here. Right. Only to realize that that's not what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to deal with the underlying issues. Yeah. So that's bravo. You're being a participant. You're being a participant.
Well, thank you very much for taking my call today.
You're welcome. Go forth and conquer.
Here I go with my luggage.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. So you're listening to Dear James live on the radio here on the Contact Talk Radio Network. We are talking about victim or participant. We'll be back after this break.
Available for private, individual, group, and corporate consultations, Dear James will provide you with the intuitive insight, answers, and advice to your life questions. Schedule your consultation by going to www.dearjames.com and click on Consultation. The gift of giving is immeasurable. Give of your time, talent, resources, and money. Give not only because you can, but because by doing so, it is already coming back to you. As a people, we are only as strong as the least among us. Together, we harness the power of the collective whole and see through our deeds the power of miracles, both large and small. Find the charity that's right for you by visiting www.dearjames.com and click on Charitable Giving. One person or kind act really does make the difference.
When you ask a question, the universe hears you, and in a multitude of ways, they communicate to you the intuitive insight, answers, and advice you seek. Ask Dear James a question and experience the magic of the universe. Visit DearJames.com and click Ask.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dear James Live on the radio, here on the Contact Talk Radio Network. Today, we have been talking about victim or participant. And I want to go back to the issue about some of the opportunities and the ways forward when we're dealing with it, when you're trying to move from a place of victimhood to participant or co-creator, and how you do that. And so again, it's self-responsibility, self-awareness, self-reflection. Those three elements, if you're willing to look at yourself, if you're willing to take responsibility for your role in the event or the emotion or the exchange or experience, and then have the awareness that that is what you're doing, and reflect on it, and listen. Listen to your soul self, not your ego self, because your ego self will take you down the victim road. But your soul self, your spirit self, will take you down the road of co-creator, of participant. And those two roads are vastly different, and they arrive at vastly different locations and places. And what ends up happening is you create self-empowerment. You create self-esteem. You become, and in any event, whether you're the victim or the participant, if you choose that, you're self-made. You are the one making the choice. You're choosing. And so you're self-made, and everything becomes self-evident. It speaks for itself. I have a dear friend, and the motto of his company is, the end result speaks for itself. And that couldn't be truer, because when we choose to be responsible and aware and to be reflective and to choose an understanding that we are co-creating, and what do I do to change my environment or my beliefs or my actions so that I am no longer a victim, the end result will speak for itself. And if you choose to be a victim, that is also self-evident, and the end result speaks for itself. So, and you also then end up building, when you start having this awareness, this self-awareness and this self-reflection, self-responsibility, you'll watch to see how your self-worth increases and your self-respect increases, because you start seeing yourself in a different light. You start understanding that you're self-made, that it's your power, it's your innate, inherent power that propels you forward, and that is life-altering. Remember, as with my caller Jennifer from Paris, remember, don't stop at the surface or at the gate. There is far more underneath or beyond, and that's what you're really meant to look at, deal with, experience, transform, and transcend. That is what you are meant to do. Seize control by letting go. And letting go means letting go of what you're holding on to, letting go of the ego self to hear the soul or spirit self. The spirit self is going to tell you the truth. The ego self is going to tell you what you want to hear. So, again, and shed at every opportunity, shed the label or identity associated with the word victim. Because when you wrap yourself in that cloak, you forever limit, you forever box yourself in. And you don't want to do that. Shakespeare's Hamlet said, "This above all, to thine own self be true." And it couldn't be more true. Above everything else, to thine own self be true. And if you keep hearing that and saying that to yourself, your soul self, your spirit self will step forward. To thine own self be true. To thine own self be true. If you just keep repeating that mantra, you'll start hearing how empowering that is. And you'll start moving yourself from this place, or this legacy for some people of victimhood, to this amazing opportunity, to this creation, because you're perfect, and everyone is perfect and evolving. That's how I look at it. And last but not least, the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said, "You are your life and nothing else." I would differ with him. I would differ with Jean-Paul on the sense that you are your life. However, you are not just your life. You are far more. You are limitless. You are a soul and a creation of the universe, of God. And that is that's just limitless. So his example to me means you are your life. Make sure that in this lifetime, in the life that you are leading and living today, look at it and understand you are your life. Do you like what you see? And if you don't, willfully seek to change it. Willfully seek to act. That is the beauty. So you've been listening to Dear James Live on the radio here on the Contact Talk Radio Network. Today was victim or participant. And I will see you next Wednesday with Express Yourself, thorn in your side. And as I always say, no matter where you are or whom you're with or what you're doing, wrap yourself in goodness. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Dear James Live on the radio with your host, Dear James. Gain intuitive insight, answers, and advice to your life questions and so much more by tuning in next week and visiting DearJames.com.